opportunity to come to you here in prayer and to come together and to reason together. And I pray, Father, at this time you give us wisdom, you give us the understanding that we need, which surpasses that which we have in ourselves. I pray, Father, as always, that you bless our nation, keep us safe in these times of turmoil, and bless this meeting. In Jesus' name I pray and ask, amen. Amen. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Do we have an agenda for anything?
No.
Don't have anything. I guess this time we'll call the Quorum Court meeting to order, and Mr. Jack called and asked for this meeting, so if y'all don't mind, I'll let him explain.
Can I do roll call, Judge?
Please, I'm coming to that. Would you do roll call, Ms. Jack?
Yes. Mr. Deaton?
Here.
Mr. Flake?
Here.
Mr. Garrison?
Here.
Mr. Howerton? Mr. McNeely?
Here.
Mr. Mills?
Here.
Mr. Phillips?
Here.
Mr. Reed?
Here.
Mr. Ritchie?
Here.
Mr. Ray?
Here.
Mr. Slaughter?
Here.
Thank you.
Looks like 10 present, one not here. I'd like to ask you all today to please consider your other fellow members, raise your hand, and be acknowledged, and let's be courteous to one another. Jack, you want to start?
The reason I call this, our last meeting, we got cut short on this subject. We had a lot of discussion going on, and we put a lot of things on the back burner, and the burners are getting full. You know, we passed this, really was, and not for Mr. Flake, but we passed this was not doing enough studies into the outcome of it. I don't mean to pick on anybody. I've done some study on this thing. There's a book back there on suggestions how you can and cannot collect this. A lot of counties, they have the sheriff has a heading of a deputy and a collector. Mr. Richard brought up a real important thing, that how's that divided out? You know, should a person collect and have to do all the rest of the stuff? I've talked to the prosecuting attorney quite lengthily on this thing. And if we didn't do something today, this thing would go into effect. The sheriff says he's not ready yet, and Ramona can no longer collect it. We're talking about losing money already. We'd go a month or two and not get anything coming in. My suggestion is, in this ordinance, is to put it back until we can do more studying. Let's get through the end of the year, get the automated system set up, and we need to sit down and study this thing and make it a joint effort between the three departments that's involved. I mean, get the good cop, the bad cop situation. If Ramona can't get the guy to voluntarily come in and pay this thing, let's get a warrant signed by our new judge, who I've just visited with quite a bit, and said he would have no problem working hand in hand with us, and then turn it over to the sheriff and let him use his powers to do the collecting. Ramona will still do the logging of the fees coming in and paying out like it should be, and all three people working together. We've proved this since we closed down the 911. We distributed that work, everybody worked together, and we got a lot done. You know, we didn't realize some of the things we did. I'm not saying it wasn't a bad deal, it kind of showed it is good, because there's some stuff that come out that wasn't getting done when we shut down the 911 office. And it was, but we also discovered that we didn't do enough in-depth study of what we were doing until we did it. I think we need to spend more time on this thing and make it work as efficiently for the counties we possibly can. I've talked to a few other counties. A lot of them can't get their information out of the computers until later in the year on how much money they're losing. But they all said that every county and state loses money on this particular project of trying to collect these fines. Everybody loses on it, and everybody got their own ideas. My idea was call this thing because if not, y'all do me a favor and us move our meeting to later next month. It's going to be over a month before anything can be done. And that's the reason I talked to the prosecuting attorney, talked to the judge, three other people, and this was my idea to come up and try to do something with this, get things moving like it has been in the past. Even though it's not moving as good as we'd like for it to move, at least it's going to be moving until we can study it more and draw it up to where all three agencies are working together working together to make this thing come out as best effectively, economically as we can for our county.
Any discussion on it?
I've got several things to discuss. Number one, I don't think we can consider any ordinance today, since we had nothing on the agenda. We haven't had 7 days notice of it. I actually did see this Friday. Matt got a copy from Jamie, I think, and sent it to me, but I never heard of it. The notice I got of the meeting said we were going to talk about the ordinance. That's what I thought we were going to do until Friday evening when I saw this that Matt sent me. I agree with most of what you say, Jack. I think we need to do that. We need to get these departments working together. But we're not going to do it by rescinding the ordinance we passed. If we're going to do it, what we have to do, I think, is amend that ordinance. And you brought up a good point. I think we need to amend the previous ordinance to say that it covers delinquent fines and fees only. Ramona remains the collector of current fines and fees and people who come in to pay. Delinquent fines and fees, she can coordinate with the sheriff's office and he collects. So my suggestion is that we take the ordinance we passed, we amend that to say that we appoint the sheriff to collect delinquent fines and fees, and we put an effective date in there when we're going to have that happen. Now, that date can be anywhere from today to our next meeting. I don't care. We can set it somewhere in there. And in that time, hopefully, we can arrange or help arrange some cooperation. And I'll be glad to work with you to try to do that between the sheriff and Ramona's office to start collecting more money on these. Lots of counties have problems with it. It's a problem all over the state. I've heard of a couple of counties that are owed $40 million in back fees and fines. We're not the only one, but we can be one that has an aggressive, good system to collect, and that's all I'm trying to set up, is a system that works, and we don't get there by rescinding what we've done and be back where we were 6 months ago when we were doing nothing. Let's look at amending that ordinance we passed, and I think we could probably do that today. Amend it to say that the sheriff is responsible only for the delinquent fines and fees. Ramona handles the paperwork, and if they are behind or delinquent, gives it to the sheriff. The sheriff deals with it. When he gets the money, if he gets any, he brings it into her. Our other choice is to do nothing.
Devin, did you ever handle it?
I did. I wanted to address the separation of delinquent and current fines because I think that that's going to end up being mass chaos. Because you're going to have some very specific definitions on what's delinquent. Because if a person is ordered to pay $100 a month, if they get 1 month behind, they're now delinquent. So that line between delinquent and current is going to be very confusing, and you're looking at a paperwork nightmare and a practicality nightmare. I think the statute also calls for a collector, so I think probably one body needs to maintain the collection, whoever you decide it's going to be. And if you do decide to amend the previous ordinance, the amendment will need to be in an ordinance form as well.
Galen was first, Lamont.
Just a point of order. Mr. Flake mentioned that we have a problem with considering any ordinance today because of the nature of the notice. So that would also extend to any amendment then, I see, adding additional verbiage to the ordinances. Would that be your take on it?
Well, I mean, my initial point, and I don't know if you have a rule for this in your handbook or something that covers that, but emergency meetings are emergency by nature. So I don't think you can plan a 7-day notice for an emergency.
I don't.
Yeah.
We broke this thing up, and it was voted down, I think, twice. Finally, it passed with one vote. A lot of people was uncomfortable with this thing to start with. That's another point I'm trying to bring up. A lot of them, it passed with one vote after the third time. So whether you want to step up and say so or not, there was a lot of people on this board was uncomfortable the way this thing was written up. The verbiage of it the whole mess to start with. And I just think we need to start over. I don't know, I'm not as smart as you are on how the ordinance goes. I did talk to Jimmy about it a little, starting Devin about it a little bit, and this is what we come up with. It is under emergency clause, so this waivers some of our normal standard operating procedures. And I just think a lot of people was uncomfortable with this thing and just kind of folded under being brought up.
Ron, you're next.
First of all, I don't think this meeting was called as an emergency meeting. This was called as a special meeting. That was what I saw. There's no emergency in what we're doing. There's an emergency clause written in this ordinance. I'm not sure that that's even appropriate. That we can argue about later. And you're right, Jack. It was a close vote every time. It was always within one vote. But that's the only way to do things. If you go one way, you got 5 people unhappy. The other way, you got 6 people unhappy. We're not accomplishing anything unless we can find a way to make the system work. All that I did, and Devin, you've helped with this a lot, is it seems to be not doable. Every time we try to come up with a solution, you tell us it's not doable. I'd like to find a doable way of doing this so we can collect. I've asked your office, I asked the young man who's here at the last meeting to help us to talk to you about coming up with a system that will work. And now you come back and said we can't separate it into delinquent and current. And I understand what you're saying, but we need to find a way of making this work, and as our attorney, I hope you will help us do that.
Devin.
First, if I may, I'd like some clarification on when, other than right now, I've said this is undoable.
I don't know who said it. We heard that Tony's office said that the ordinance we passed was not enforceable, and that...
Okay, I don't know where you heard that, but I don't think that's correct.
Okay, what did you hear? What is your rule? You weren't here to tell us.
Let me just start at the beginning. First of all, I apologize for not being at the meeting. I was at a Crimes Against Children conference, hopefully learning how to do my job better and protect our kids. So I did send Mr. Parker. He's a very good attorney. He's our deputy, and he's going to do the best job that he can. Your job at Quorum Court is to designate a collector. The collector either performs to your satisfaction or doesn't. If they don't, you appoint a different collector. If you can't find someone in the county that performs to your satisfaction, you may want to consider talking to collection agencies. I don't know whether that's been done or not. But ultimately, collection is a tedious process, and depending on how each collector goes about collecting, whether they try to use suspensions or liens or whatever, it's ultimately up to each one to decide how they're going to do that. And if you're not satisfied with how effective they're being, then you designate someone else. There was some discussion, I know the sheriff came in and talked about how collecting on district court, and I think that he thought he could do this without extra people at some point by using dispatchers, if I'm remembering correctly.
If I have a chance, I'll put it up.
Okay.
But
my understanding is that as of right now, the sheriff has determined he's not ready to take this over. So there's going to be a lapse in collection, because when this ordinance takes effect, Ramona is not the collector anymore. The sheriff is the collector. So it's either going to function or it's not. So what's doable from a legal standpoint is not necessarily doable from a practical standpoint. You can appoint the sheriff to be collector. If he can't immediately take over that role, then practically speaking, it's not doable. And you need to look at Ramona, or, she's the most logical choice as of right now as to who can take this over.
Gail is next.
To reiterate on what Bill says, the ordinance that we passed takes effect tonight, and the sheriff is saying that he's unable to do it. So we have a problem.
I haven't heard from the sheriff today.
Ron, you're out of order.
It says the sheriff is unable to fulfill his duties. And so, one way or another, we're going to have a problem. either he's going to have to start collecting or not. If he's not able to do it, then I think we do have an emergency. Because unfortunately, we're going to have that lag, because Ramona's not going to be able to do it. So I would say that would justify an emergency, because now we have these people wanting to pay, go to Ramona's office, says, I can't pay, then they go to the sheriff's office and says, well, we're not able to take your money, then these people are out there. So then they don't go to pay, then they're in trouble with the judicial system because they didn't pay.
And then I tell everybody else.
John Ray, you're next.
I would like to ask the sheriff to give us some detail on what the problem is in him performing the duties of collectors.
Well, first of all, I gave you a handout, and I want you to understand that in, I think it was May, the state of Arkansas had a training class in Little Rock for all circuit clerks and anybody else who wanted to attend for the serious problem that we're having statewide in most circuit courts. They're not collecting the fines and fees. And if that continues, then it's going to be a burden on the counties to come up with the money to pay for the operation of the courts, which is now being paid by the state. So in that meeting, they go through the various steps. Whoever is assigned the collector of the delinquent accounts, they give you the various steps that you need to follow in order to recover that money.
Could I interject? There seems to be, is this a collector of delinquent accounts, or is it a collector?
This is going to be the collector of delinquent accounts, which is really the system that we have now, because the way the system works is that as the people come in and pay their fines and fees, and again, there's not much difference between district court and circuit court. And here, Devin, it states here, it defines what delinquent accounts are. They go, it's very clearly defined as to what's a delinquent account. What happens is that if a person becomes delinquent in their payments, they become delinquent. Then it's up to the court to identify all those delinquent accounts at the end of the month. Okay, a warrant may be issued for some delinquency. If a summons is issued, and this is going to be the decision of either the district judge or the circuit judge, they will determine, well, should the person be a warrant issued for their arrest, or should we summons them to court to determine why they haven't been making their payments? And then before the judge, they can arrange for a lesser amount to be paid. And if they don't show up at the court, then there's going to be a warrant for the arrest for failure to pay. The issue that I have been having is that we have never received warrants for failure to pay. No one is reviewing the accounts at the end of each month to determine who is delinquent. Once that determination is made and the judge decides a warrant is going to be issued, then the warrant comes to us. Then we do all of the research that we can to identify the person, locate that person, and recover the money. Recently, that was done by court order, and I think we got from the Western District, Eureka Springs. I think we may have gotten maybe over 100 accounts of people who are delinquent. We immediately sent out letters. For those who lived out of state, we sent out 89 letters. 45 were returned as undeliverable, and the reason being is that we are looking at a period of over 12 years. 44 did respond. We got the letters. 17 called us directly and asked what they can do to get that taken care of. And those 17 that contacted us, the amount that they owe the courts was over $26,000. We advised them to contact the circuit court because we're not collecting the money from them. They had to go to the circuit court. So just in the letter writing alone, we had 17 people contact us. We don't know how many contacted Ramona. We don't know how many contacted Eureka Springs. But for the numbers that contacted us, it was $26,000. The next step we're doing now is that for those who have not contacted us, now we're going to send a letter to the state of Arkansas to have their license suspended, and therefore they'll be contacting us, hopefully, in order to take care of this. But the biggest problem is the fact that we need to be told, or the judge first has to make that determination as to whether they want a summons or a felony, a warrant. Once the warrant is issued, it comes to us, and then we go to serve that warrant. We cannot do our job unless we know who is delinquent, who's falling behind. I am willing to say, leave it with Ramona. I'll be glad to send my people over to her office to review all the ledger sheets and determine who is a delinquent account so that we can begin this process, because if we keep kicking the can down the road, we're not making any progress at all. And we're looking at some very serious issues. So even if we didn't do anything today and you were to rescind the ordinance, we still are facing the same problem based on a procedure set up, that unless we are notified by the courts that these people are delinquent, unless we get a warrant, the sheriff's office cannot do their job.
Lamont was next to Lou.
I think the sheriff began to explain, and my question was going to be for Devin, about what is a collector? What does that mean?
Well, and it's not defined in our statute, so, you know.
Is it something we could define? If there's
I don't think you could necessarily define it. What you can do is appoint a collector, you can designate a collector, and either like the job they're doing and keep it with them, or not like it and move it to someone else. And I know that's not a great answer, but that's what I've got for you. If I could, just briefly on what the sheriff said, I think that designating something delinquent within the collector's office, who collects all of them, is something that happens, of course, because that's how the summonses and warrants are issued. So that's correct. I don't think I'm talking about separating delinquent and current and where they're collected and by whom. That is going to be a very tricky, messy deal. The sheriff is right. The way that this ideally will work is that the court will issue summonses or warrants based on failure to pay. Those then get transferred to the sheriff to be searched. And I think he has guys that, am I right, that all they do is serve summonses and warrants, or a big chunk of what they do. Is that right?
They follow all the different steps that are in the handbook. Not just physically serve it, but they do the computer searches and locate the people wherever they are in the United States.
That system, when it's flowing, is a good system. There's been a hiccup over the last several months. I don't know whose fault it is, I don't care whose fault it is, but there's been a hiccup in the communication. If that gets sorted out, you know, I know we're going to have a new circuit judge in January. Ramona, well, we don't know who's going to be the circuit clerk yet. But I think given Ms. Neal and Ms. Ramona both will have no problem working with that judge. And I guess one of you said you talked to him and he's willing to issue warrants and summonses based on the process. So it's the system that we've got.
Part two.
As far as the legal process.
I have a part two to the question. Is it necessary for a warrant to be issued before a letter is sent, notifying the person that the amount is delinquent?
No, it's not.
So there can be proactive steps taken.
Sure. And I know Ms. Ramona has been issuing letters similar to that. We've gone over, you know, how many to send, and at what point we stopped and said, okay, now we want to summon. There's a difficult, you know, part of that, and that a lot of these people, unfortunately, are transient. So the last known address that we have is very rarely the address that we can actually reach them at. That's why a lot of times we end up having to get to the summons or warrant route.
You're next.
I just have a question, Sheriff. Sheriff, are you ready to start doing collections tomorrow? I mean, is your agency ready to start doing collections?
Let me answer it two different ways. If we go by delinquent accounts, we should be getting that information from the circuit clerk's office already.
Okay.
What we are willing to do is that we are willing to take on the collection of all fines and fees to free up the circuit clerk's office so they can start getting their records ready for automation, because if the manual records are not correct, putting them into an automated file is just putting, you know, garbage into garbage, garbage in, garbage out. I am willing to take on the collection of all fines and fees, because I don't need any additional people to do that. We can set up a system just like we're doing for district court. And then this way we'll free up Ramona's office for her people to start working on getting the records ready to go for automation, which is going to be quite a process. But the one thing that hasn't been said, for those who have attended the training class that they had in Little Rock, is that this situation is getting so bad that next year there is going to be a law that says the circuit court is going to have to behave just like the district court. One's going to be a mirror image of the other. So we can either start working on it now or wait for the law to be passed, but I think it's best we keep hearing this word being cooperative. Let's start being cooperative. Let's start working on this. Let's start putting things in order so that we can readily automate. Okay.
Based on our ordinance, it doesn't designate delinquent accounts, it's just making you collector. But, so you're ready to do all the duties of the collector, that means collecting money?
Just delinquent. We can't do the other because the records are not set up for us to take them over.
And that's
Just
our
can't do
problem.
it.
Yeah, your name.
That kind of answers for my question. If we had the automation system in place, that would speed up the process of people that's not paying, is that correct?
Yeah, the benefit of having it automated, and I wish Buddy Neal was here to explain it. I think Ramona has said there's what, you have 2,000 accounts? I think the number you gave me, Pam, about 2,000.
Between the
Okay.
districts.
Now understand at the end of the month, when the month closes, somebody has to go through all of those manual records. And like Devin is saying, what makes it a delinquent account? Once you have that established with 30 days or 60 days or 90 days, plus somebody has to physically go through each one of those ledger sheets to determine who is delinquent. Then the next step is to send that to the circuit judge. Do they want a summons, set out a summons or a warrant? And then it will come to us for us to serve. But that is the process, and until we can get that automated with the automated records in district court, at the end of the month, you just tell the computer, kick out all those delinquent accounts, and a warrant is kicked out, and they're given to Judge Jackson. He reviews them, and he determines whether or not he wants to issue that warrant or quash the warrant. But that's where you're saving the time, because this way, look at all the man hours you're going to save. How long would it take you to manually go through all those ledger books to determine who's delinquent?
Tim, I believe your name.
As Devin has said, there was as she said, a hiccup in the system. There are certain things that we cannot fix. We cannot tell a sitting circuit judge what he shall or shall not do in regard to warrants. That would be folly. There is definitely a change coming in the first of the year. There is an emergency that exists because as this ordinance is written and passed, we're going to be in violation of the law if we're not collecting fines. All of it that comes out of the circuit court. That happens tomorrow. We're going to have to do something. We cannot sit here and say, we need to do and we need to do. Something's got to happen today in order to keep us in compliance, strict compliance with the letter of the law. We can do nothing. We can act on this. We can try something else, but we got to do something today, period.
Come on.
Devin, the ordinance is already in effect, is that correct?
It went into effect 30 days after the publishing. So, it was published when?
I would have to go back and look, I think, July 25th. Yeah.
July 25th. So, you know, if this is 30 days, then I'm not sure where we're getting the 4:30 mark. I would assume that it went into effect this morning.
That was today.
Even worse.
So today,
It's in effect.
I believe that Ramona is no longer the collector today.
Larry?
The only thing I see, the first person that walks in here to pay a fine and can't pay that fine, there's gonna be a backlash from that will take a little while to heal. Because the word's gonna spread fast on that.
I'm not understanding that calamity. If somebody comes in to pay a fine, and they can't pay it to Ramona, they can pay it to the sheriff, right? I mean,
Gavin, I believe your
The
name.
sheriff said he's not prepared, the only thing he's prepared to do is
Well, he can-
delinquents, but there's other fines besides delinquents. He has to take the current payments also, based on this ordinance. That's the dilemma, Mr. Reeves.
what prevents you from taking payment of the fine?
When this was originally being discussed, I was understanding that we were going to be doing it just like the district court. That, because right now, by law, we collect all the money for the district court. Whether it's a warrant or whether it's, because, which makes this kind of a strange discussion we're having here. In district court, by law, there has to be a separation of duties. We have to collect the money, and at the end of each month, we send out a docket or a report to Betty showing all the money that was collected. These are all the people who are on time pays or come in and pay for their citations. We do that for the district court. Now, why in district court, it's law that those duties have to be separated, but in circuit court, it's completely different. What I said I could do, because it was my understanding, we would just collect money. Not have to post to each everybody's individual account, make sure that the money is sent to the victims, money sent to the prosecutor's office, money sent to the defense attorney. Our understanding from the beginning is that we would collect the money, and then at each month, we would provide a circuit court with the people who came and paid, the case number, and how much they paid, and then that would go to Ramon's office. We can do that. We can collect the money, just like we're doing with district court. But to post to the ledgers, send checks to the victims, send checks to the prosecutor's office, send checks to the public defender's office, that we can't do. We never thought that was going to be something that we would be responsible for doing.
Tim, did that answer your question?
Yeah.
He could take the money, but
One at a time.
it wouldn't go.
He's asking me a question.
Well, wait a minute. He could take the money, certainly, but he can't just let it sit there, because by law, it has to be distributed in so many different places. That he doesn't have personnel to do. Now that I'm sorry.
Can I respond to that?
You sure can.
Well, the answer is, Ramona says that she won't do the other. The sheriff can collect the money. He could tell Ramona how much money he collected, and she could do the bookkeeping.
Tim?
No, sir.
Why not?
Because the ordinance itself restricts that. Look at your ordinance. I actually read it before we voted on it. Did the sheriff read it? The ordinance that placed it in your ballpark. It says specifically, all things now fall in his purview. Read your ordinance.
Tom McNeely, I believe,
I've been thinking about this quite a bit. I'm glad that Jack called me to War Teacher. And what I was talking about, because last month, after it passed the third reading, and we heard that there's going to be a problem because of didn't know the sheriff, when I voted for this, I didn't know the sheriff was taking on half of the department of the circuit clerk of distribution of monies. I thought we voted on collection. And I looked back and listened to all our Quorum Court meetings since April. And back then, when we first started talking about it, 42 minutes after the meeting started, Devin gave us a statement, which is pretty much what she said today, that the sheriff can collect the money, and then, but then, see what she said, and then Ron asked her, or we hire a collection agency, Ron asked her, why can't the sheriff do it? How come in 50-something counties, the sheriff's department is doing it? And then she said, well, he can, and collect the money, but did not, never hear in any of the Quorum Court deals that we talked about that they have to do the distribution of money after it's collected until just last month. Then I talked to Boone County, and they have, but one thing most important is that the guy from Little Rock, the Supreme Court said, we have to change the attitude of collection. If we go by it and also our attitude, it's not going to be collected, but we do have to have more aggressive. And it's a statewide problem. And Boone County, they collect quite a bit every month. They've been doing, the ladies in charge there, she's been doing it over 10 years. And she has 2 ladies helping her, but she has to do all the distributions too. So it's kind of a move. When I thought about passing that and voting for it, I saw that the sheriff would collect the money. And then what we get to see is a problem with bureaucracy. You know, at the hardware store, somebody comes in and pay on their account. I can take their check, and then I'll give it to the bookkeeper, she'll take care of it. But, you know, it seems like we could do that here too, until we got it straightened out. I mean, if somebody wants to pay you, we always say, if you want to pay us, we'll take your money. But that's in the real world, but now we're in the government world, we can't do it like that.
Larry's next.
I think the question is partly on everybody's mind. I want to ask Devin, and this may be a two-part question. You said that Quorum Court has the authority, if whoever we're having to collect fines, if we're not happy with the way they're doing it, we can have somebody else do it. Do we have the authority to have the sheriff collect the fines and Ramona to do all the paperwork on it?
I'm going to refer you, Ramona, on that one, because she's had the discussions with the auditors that I think will come into play here.
Okay, but I think that question is on everybody's mind, on whether it can be separated.
I spoke to y'all a week ago Friday about the different entities that I talked to about this process of transfer of the duties. The one that I left out, well, I'll just say it again, who it was. I talked to Tony Rogers. I talked to Jonathan Greer at the Association of Arkansas Counties, who's one of the attorneys down there. And I talked to our auditors. I talked to the auditors who were here in the building. And I also called Joe Stacy, who is over, however much, I don't know how much he is over, but anyway. And all of this said the collection and the bookkeeping and circuit court all goes together.
We got online under this law that the Quorum Courts can select either an agency, the sheriff's office, or a contractor to collect the money. And here in about, let me just read to you. If you assign it to a private contractor, it reads, the court shall credit the defendant with the gross amount remitted to the private contractor. The private contractor shall remit the gross amount collected to the county official, agency, or department designated under the section on a monthly basis. Payment of the commission shall be through the county claims process. So when you have a contractor collecting a private contractor, all they're doing is collecting the amount of money that they said this person's indebted to you for. They submit the gross amounts to the county. Then when they get through finishing the process, then they give that collection agency a commission on how much is received. It has nothing to do with the bookkeeping. And the sheriff's office or any agency that you select falls under the same designation.
Larry?
Now, you're saying the sheriff's office would fall under private contract?
No, but the procedure set up for the collection of delinquent fines and fees.
John?
I'd like to ask Devin to see if you can go back and research this and see whose idea is the correct idea.
Well, it depends on what you mean by whose idea is the correct.
Well,
first, if I could just, I would distinguish the sheriff from a private entity with which we're contracting. That's a different animal altogether. The sheriff is a county officer, so he's going to be similarly situated to the owner. So I would first answer that. Now, as far as whose idea is best, I'm not sure where you're going with that.
well, from a legal standpoint, can we have the sheriff collect and Ramona do the bookkeeping?
I'm never going to advise you to do something that's going to make an auditor mad. Because they're going to be the ones that see you when you do something wrong. So if the auditor's saying no, I'm saying no. It's all or nothing, one party's doing it. If they're a county officer.
So there is no authority other than the auditor in this particular situation?
Well, the auditor is the one that tells you whether you are financially within the law. So as far as that goes, yeah, I'm listening to him.
Lamont?
Well, I'd like to see some citations for that. Okay, I mean, we've had lots of opinions given us, but I would like to see something, and this is where I'm having a real problem, because I have looked at the law. I cannot find anything to parrot what's being told to me.
As far as the separation of duties?
Correct.
Then I think what might be a good idea then is let's pull an auditor in. Let's say, why do you think this? Can we, if we were to pass an ordinance that separates it, does that change anything? But that's not a question that anybody posed to me before today, so I'm not prepared to answer that.
Well, But what the issue is, if a private contractor is able to collect the money and then disperse it on a monthly basis, even though the sheriff's office may be similarly situated to any other elected department head, it seems like the procedure would be the same. That the idea is to collect and then have the records taken care of. I'm not seeing the logic.
Sure. Well, and nobody ever said bureaucracy was logic.
Tim, right now, good collections of our fines, costs, distributions, restitution stands in limbo. That's exactly where we are right now. We have a long year out ahead of us that we could look at this and perhaps separate the powers and responsibilities. But right now, we've got to do something about this, or whether we like it or not, we're not operating like a hardware store. The first comes in wants to pay their bill. Who can receive it? Who can distribute it? Sheriff, I think.
You know what, again, I would like to make the offer. I cannot serve warrants unless the warrants are issued. I am not part of that process. That comes from the circuit clerk and the judge. So if I can't go out there and collect money, the county is suffering. And what's going to happen again? I want to repeat that there has been a meeting in Little Rock that pretty soon there is going to be a law passed that the circuit court is going to mirror the district court. It's going to be the same process. We collect it, send it to the courts, they disperse the money. But until the studies are done, the research is done, all I'm asking is that for me to do my job, I need the warrants. For me to get the warrants, somebody has to review those manual records and determine who is delinquent, which has not been done. Because, like I said, I got close to 12 years of history that shows failure to pay warrants have not been issued. I am willing to send my people over to Ramona's office to work with her to review those accounts at the end of each month to determine who is delinquent, so at least we can keep the process going, because collecting money from somebody who's willing to pay is easy. Identifying all these people who are scattered all over, and the sad thing about it, when we look back at the ones that we did get, a good number of those people are deceased. So unless you act quickly on the warrants to locate these people, you're not going to be collecting any money. So my offer, until this is all resolved, I will be glad to have some of my people work with Ramona to identify delinquent accounts at the end of the month so warrants can be issued.
Devin and Galen both had their hand up at the same time, ladies first.
I would like to dispute, and maybe there's a terminology problem, but there have been warrants in some instances, there has been process issued for failure to pay. Because some of it's come out of my office, and I'm in criminal court, and I see large chunks of the docket that are specific to failure to pay. So there is process being issued. Sometimes it's titled failure to comply or revocation, but I do want to correct that misconception that there's no process being issued.
Galen, I believe it's your turn.
Okay. I'm not here to talk about the board. We're here to figure out what we want to do with this ordinance that is approved today. How are we going to do this if he's saying he's not ready to collect it? And the argument is the duties of collection and distribution. That's what we're here to figure out.
With Jackson, that.
I don't remember exactly what month it was. We pretty much agreed that we were going to give Ramona 90 days so she could get the automated system up and going at little or no cost to the county. She had a friend that was retired that was a little bit bored sitting at home that agreed to come in and work and enter all that data into the system. If the automated system was up and going, that's what I thought we were going to do, and then this other one just kept popping up, and finally passed it. But the big deal, I mean, Sheriff, you agree, if the automated system was working, you would get, the stuff would pop out and go to the judge first, get it signed, get it back to you, and the wheels will start turning in the right direction and making progress. Is that true?
Yeah, but understand you have to keep manual records and automated. You can't give up on the manual records and go to automated. You got to maintain both. But what you're saying, Jack, is that in talking to Cook County, Donna, And I've talked to a lot of counties, and I'm really embarrassed to say that throughout the state of Arkansas, you're not gonna find one county doing the same thing what the other county is doing. Boone County is, I'm really amazed at what they have accomplished there, but it took 3 people 4 months to go through all the manual records to make the transition to an automated system. So there's a lot of time involved, and again, what records I have looked at, there's gonna have to be a check to make sure there's accuracy on the manual records before we ever put it into an automated system. So again, if Ramona wants to do that, I'd be more than happy to send 2 of my people over there to work with her to get it done, because sooner or later, the law's gonna be passed, and circuit court's gonna be just like district court, so we better start doing something to get it done.
Which one you want to go first? Go ahead, Senator.
Do you preside?
Larry?
Bottom line, we come in here for a special meeting at 1 o'clock this afternoon, because sometime today, this morning, 4:30 this afternoon, let's say noon, an ordinance went into effect that Ramona cannot collect fines. The judge says he's not capable at this time of taking it all over. When we walk out of this meeting today, somebody needs to be able to collect fines if somebody's standing down here at the counter and wants to pay. Because if we tell them we can't take it, that will spread through the community very quick. If you won't have anybody in here tomorrow won't pay. That's the bottom line.
Tom?
I'd like for Devin and Ramona and the sheriff to tell me why we couldn't Ramona's office surely has some paper records, some ledger sheets on these people. Why can't she get a copy of that to the sheriff, so the sheriff can have paperwork to collect fines from people that come in, and not necessarily all the delinquent ones, but get copies of her records of what's owing, because she's got these records, so when people come in, she can collect them. What is the problem with doing that, Devin? Having Ramona deliver to the sheriff, or the sheriff pick up from Ramona's office, the ledger cards or whatever she has, evidencing these fines, so when people come in to pay, they can pay the sheriff the amounts that they pay Ramona.
Well, there's nothing legally that prevents that information from going over. My understanding, the only thing that's preventing that right now is that the sheriff is not capable of doing all the duties that go with it.
Ramona?
I'm almost finished with going through and checking every single one to make sure that it is correct before it goes to them. I'm almost finished with that. That's taken me a couple of weeks, one person. I have made copies of all the books. Rita and Carol as well. So all we have to do is go through our pay sheet for the month and make sure that the copies are identical to the hard book. So I'm essentially ready. I was hoping that I could finish up the checking of them by 4:30 this afternoon and have it all ready to hand over to the sheriff to do. But because his system isn't any different than mine, will not be any different than mine until he gets his computerized program. So it's no change other than the who. Jack's right. I had the system almost in place. It was maybe a month out yet. I had the volunteer retired gal who I trust explicitly to put it in accurately. She's been a court reporter and transcriptionist for years. She knows about accuracy. It troubles me to have multiple people inputting the information, because if you don't put it in exactly the same, uniformity, consistency is the key in a computer program. Because if you have one dash or one space or one comma out of place, then when you go to search that, it's not going to pull it up unless you can put it in exactly the same. So having one person to do all that is more accurate, more consistent, more trustworthy, I would say. Not that I'm saying I distrust the sheriff's people, like they're going to do something illegal. Absolutely not. But I just do think that you've got to be careful, well, I don't want to be the dead horse.
John.
I'm just having a terrible time understanding why what the sheriff offered to work with Ramona wouldn't work, or if Ramona was willing to let one or two of her people go with the sheriff, why that would work. I don't understand why that won't work.
It may very well work in the future, the way it's set up now, it can't. We've argued this all one at a time because of the way the ordinance is written that we passed. I mean, it's fair on its face, it's right there. Are we going to say, oh yes, we passed it, but we didn't mean it, so we'll just enforce it the way we want to? That's what we're saying. Call for the question and the vote, the reading of this ordinance as an emergency clause, and call for the vote.
There's no question to be called.
Yeah, we can't call it, it's not on the agenda.
There was no agenda. I'm sorry.
I believe Ramona was next, you still want to do that? Ramona?
The ordinance called for the sheriff to collect fines, fees, and costs. We don't have a definition of collect. We also don't have a definition of dispatch. It's the same old problem. We don't have definitions for things. It says collect fines. Collecting is more than the passing of money across the counter. That's receiving. Collecting is doing something proactively to get the money in. That's collecting. That's what we assigned him to do. Not any different than hiring a collection agent to go out and collect money that is due and owing. Ramona has said she's there to collect the money that is paid across the counter. We have $2.5 million. We don't know how much of it is collectible. And yet, year after year after year, we nickel dime every damn department head coming at budget time because we don't have enough money. And here we have an opportunity to perhaps find out that we have money available. And it's folly for us not to pursue that. What we did with this ordinance was direct the sheriff to collect, not to receipt. I think it's clear on its face.
Jack and
The reason I asked this to happen was the fact is, when we left this meeting last week, we were told that the way things are right now, the sheriff stated that he could not collect it the way it was right now without hiring more people. Ron brought up the fact, well, why not take the people from Ramona and move them over there? Well, the people from Ramona does other things besides just working that. So, when I left here last week, I was thinking this ain't going into effect. And it's nothing towards either one of these department heads, is the fact that it boiled down, and if any of y'all understood it differently when we left last week, what it was explained to us before the argument started, and the judge dropped his gavel to stop it, and we moved on to something else. I left here with the opinion that we're kind of in limbo. You know, Ramona cannot do it anymore, and the sheriff is not ready to do it. So, and like Larry said, it's going to spread. You know, if I walk in and say, here's my $20, they say, well, I can't take it. Well, everybody I know, don't even go there and pay it. They're not going to take it. That's why I'm trying to head off. If you got a better idea, guys, jump up and do it. And if I forgot to get an agenda set up for this thing, to cover this thing, that's my bad. You know, it's the first time, I guess, nobody's done one of these in a long time. But anyway, that was my thought. If I did it wrong, so did it. But anyway, we can move on with something.
Don's next.
I remember all the time when Judge Crow came down here, and he stood over there behind Larry, he said that he would sign all the warrants. And then he left, and then Ramona showed up and said that he wasn't. I wish I would have been here at the same time to see them argue about that, but Ramona can't, like Gail has pointed out, she can't do nothing until the warrants were arrested process. So this is a fast system, the whole thing.
John Ray, and then
Could I ask my question again? The sheriff has volunteered to work with Ramona. Ramona, could you explain why that won't work?
Logistics.
What logistics?
I have no room in my office to have his people come in. I can't let my people go out because we have other work that we do as well. And the idea of taking some of my people, because I wouldn't have as much work to do if the sheriff got it, and sending my people out there, that's ludicrous because I'm afraid we're beating the horse again, but we record deeds and mortgages and all that kind of stuff. We take child support. We handle all the full court and the paperwork
I'm
that comes and
not
goes.
suggesting that we take people away. The sheriff has offered to come work with
I don't have
you.
any place to put them, John.
Could we find another room?
I'm not letting those books out of my office. Sorry.
Lamont,
I move to put on its first reading, proposed ordinance being enacted by the Quorum Court as prepared by Devin for Jack.
I moved to adopt.
I already did move.
Second.
Well, would it be an emergency if it only one reading? Anybody?
If it passes with an emergency clause, it's one reading.
But he called for it to be on the first reading, didn't you, Lamont?
Does it not require more votes to pass with one reading with an emergency clause?
I think it does.
I think it requires 7 or 8 to pass.
8.
So that's why I put it for the first reading.
you called the question.
I moved to consider, to have this ordinance read.
Okay, who seconded?
Jack did.
Any more discussion?
I'd like to say, I think we ought to think about the sheriff. He's telling us that the way it has to work, he can't do it right now. You know, it's a total job, so there's no way we want to put that burden on him, trying to do this in so fast a situation without any kind of computer system, without any help or anything. That's what my thought is.
Anybody follow? Vote.
It needs to be read.
It needs to be read. You read it, please, Ms. Jimmy?
Be it enacted by the Quorum Court of the County of Carroll, State of Arkansas, an ordinance to be entitled, an emergency ordinance rescinding ordinance number 2014-6, and declaring the circuit clerk as collector for the fines assessed in the circuit court. Whereas ordinance 2014-6 was passed on July 18, 2014, appointing the Carroll County Sheriff to collect fines, fees, and costs assessed in the circuit court of Carroll County, Arkansas. And whereas the sheriff is unable to immediately fulfill these duties, and whereas it is necessary to continue uninterrupted the collections of fines, fees, and costs, now therefore be enacted by the Quorum Court of the County of Carroll, State of Arkansas. Section 1, Ordinance 2014-6 is hereby rescinded. Section 2, the Carroll County Circuit Clerk is designated as the collector of fines, fees, and costs assessed in the Circuit Courts of Carroll County, Arkansas. Section 3, Emergency Clause. There is an immediate need to pass this ordinance to continue uninterrupted the collection of fines, fees, and costs in Carroll County. Accordingly, an emergency is declared to exist, and this ordinance shall be effective immediately upon its passage and approval.
Move to adopt.
Jack moved to adopt, Devin second. Larry?
Okay. We read this as an emergency ordinance. Lamont made the motion to do it on its first reading as an ordinance that has to be read 3 times. First of all, that would need to go around the table and on probably a voice vote, all in favor of that, to to do it on one reading instead of doing it as an emergency ordinance. But we went ahead and read it as an emergency ordinance.
Ron?
I think that before you can do even that, you have to go around the table and see if anyone
Read it
objects.
as an emergency ordinance.
Ron?
I think that before you can do even that, you have to go around the table and see if anyone objects considering this ordinance. I don't think, under our rules, any JP can object and we will not consider any item that we don't have 7 days notice on. That's rules we passed and we've always followed for the last 7, 8 years.
Well, we passed the ordinance, that if something was brought in new, that we didn't see until we got here, it was on the table, that if it was unanimous that everybody wanted to see it, it could, but if anyone objected to it. But now that was also on a normal Quorum Court meeting. It didn't specify when we passed the agreement if it was a special call meeting.
Go back to definitions.
Yes.
But all I'm suggesting is that I think it would be worthwhile to go around and see if everyone consents to consider this. Or
you go to consent to it, everybody else will read it.
well, I will. Yeah.
Okay. I think you.
All in favor?
I'd like to know what I'm voting on.
We'll just put this on the table and on it.
Lamont?
If I can respond to Larry, there's an emergency clause in this ordinance. In order to pass an emergency ordinance on one reading, it is necessary to have 3/5, I believe, 8 out of 11.
I knew where you were coming
In favor of this. Given the time, I didn't want to take that chance of not having 8 votes first time around, because it would have been defeated and all would have been over.
I agree with you. I knew where you were coming from.
But after the emergency clause, it's a part of the ordinance.
Okay. Okay.
Which means that if this is passed, the emergency clause controls it.
Then I can ask for a reading, for the second reading on it.
Yes. No, it hasn't.
If it gets 8 votes, it passes as an emergency.
Yeah.
Emergency clause doesn't need a reading.
But if it only passes by a majority, then you ask for a second reading.
Any more discussion?
What am I voting on?
That's what we got.
Did you vote to add it to the agenda? I think that's what you asked if you were voting on. If everybody's okay to add it.
Sam is asking if we agree to vote on it.
If we agree to vote.
All in favor of that to the agenda? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carried. Now it's open for discussion.
Yes.
Y'all ready for the vote?
You know, Sam, where it says here, sheriff immediately, unable to fill his duties. I don't like that wording, because it's kind of like you hire a mechanic to work on something, and you don't give him no tools, you wonder why he didn't do it. Well, you didn't give him no tools, the sheriff doesn't have any tools to do everything he needed to do at that time.
I'm not supposed to say anything, but I think you've already passed that one.
Yeah, I think.
Call for vote?
Mr. Deaton?
Yes.
Mr. Flake?
Yes.
Mr. Garrison?
Yes.
Mr. Howerton? Sorry. Mr. McNeely?
Yes.
Mr. Mills?
Yes.
Mr. Phillips?
Yes.
Mr. Reed?
No.
Mr. Ritchie?
Yes.
Mr. Briggs?
Yes.
Mr. Swafford?
Yes.
Nine to one.
9-2, one this year.
You put on notice, this is coming back next month. Okay.
my understanding is, what? I'm confused.
Make a motion to adjourn.
No,
Wait a minute.
Yeah, please.
now, wait. When you say something about next month, you're talking about the discussion?
We're going to have a new ordinance.
Okay, but this ordinance has.
That's
For the next month, the ordinance is back on collecting.
The kids coming back.
Larry moved to adjourn, but it's seconded.
Seconded.
Everybody do mine. All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
I'll make a motion.
It's done deal. It's done.
You can get it to Larry.
Just for Rodney.
Next Friday.
Thank you. I'm
several months ago, I went to all the mayors and done the